Hey everyone, Seth here. Quick reminder, if you want to contact us with a question or comment or whatever, there are a couple ways you can do so. Either you can go to our email at more.layers.podcast@gmail.com, or you can go to YouTube, use the comment section below the videos, or a direct YouTube message is another way you can do that. And just feel free to give us any questions, comments, podcast topic suggestions, whatever, shout out, whatever, and we'll try to get back. Hey everyone, welcome again to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and I would like to start off by giving a quick hello to my mother. Uh, she tells me every week that she watches the episode, usually when she's driving to and from work. So, to my mother, thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mrs. Smith. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and well, we are, I believe, just now 9 days away actually from our big Artists Unlimited reunion slash show announcement. So that'll be coming up again on Saturday, May 4th.
Hmm.
Yep.
About a week and a half or so, we're really starting to think like, what could the show possibly be? We already know at least one or two shows that it can't or at least won't be. So those are ruled out. But there could be a wide range of things that they could do. It could be something they've done before. It could be something that they haven't done for a long time. It could be something that they've never done before.
I think it should
Usually,
be harmless to I think it should be harmless to ask, well, what are some people guessing it's gonna be?
oh, for sure. I'm definitely going to be, excuse me, going around asking people leading up to that day what they think it's going to be. In fact, I'm sure that even on the day of the reunion, when everybody gets together, before the announcement is made, everyone is essentially going to be putting in their final guesses.
So, have you heard anybody's guesses yet?
Not too many, no. I think the biggest conversation we've had when it came to figuring out what the show could be was when we were all together again for a mutual actress's birthday party. And a few of us were gathered around one of the tables and we started thinking, okay, could it be this one? And if it is, why would they not have made the announcement sooner? Um, but don't get us wrong. Seth and I are not like pushing the board or the directors or whatever to announce what the show is. We understand that it's a tough decision and it can take a while. Um, but it's like if it's taken them until May 4th to make the announcement, then it could have been a difficult decision. It could have been a battle to make sure they have the rights to do the show or some other reason entirely.
Yeah, I think after like in light of what happened last time when we had to kind of switch out a show, I feel like they've had some like in advance conversations with like the school district or whoever is involved in this, and they want to make sure or that situation doesn't happen again, and maybe they just and they want to just avoid a repetition of that, and maybe that's the main thing.
Maybe. And I remember when they first announced that they were doing Shrek back in 2019, even though they made the official announcement to us, they still asked us to refrain from telling anybody else on social media or whatever until they finalize some details.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that if it's taken them that long to be ready to tell us, then I guess odds are it's going to be especially good this time.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Yeah. All right. Well, we this is I guess kind of a more or less similar subject. Recently Actually, we've done this a couple times in the past couple years. Myself, Jordan, and some of our castmates have actually gone and actually attended milestone theatrical reissues of popular films. I mean, first time we did that was when Disney was reissuing The Nightmare Before Christmas for its 30th,
Hmm.
and that was I think in October, the Tech Week of Mary Poppins, and then more recently we did that again, and when they put back out Shrek 2, which is apparently 20 years old this year.
It's still difficult to wrap my head around that. It's like not only is Shrek at least 20 years old, but so is the second movie. Um, and what's interesting is, aside from when they were re-releasing some of the Disney classics in 3D, re-releasing a movie in theaters, at least for me, was unheard of. And now, after Nightmare Before Christmas, I'm suddenly starting to see it pop up all the time. Like like you said with Shrek 2, they did it with Nightmare Before Christmas. They're doing it with at least one or two of the Star Wars movies. I don't know if they're doing all of them or just some of them, but they're doing the same thing with all the live action Spider Man movies. It's like usually, I guess, when an anniversary rolls around, they will do something like that. But yeah, it's starting to happen a lot. And I think some of that might have to do with the whole theater versus streaming thing.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of like a big sort of talking point that I kind of had down in my notes here. Like there is something of a rivalry, like a competition between film theaters and streaming platforms like Disney Plus, Hulu, and other ones. Well, and one advantage apparently that some would argue is that there is more content relevant to the features themselves that is offered on streaming platforms. And a lot of movies, for one reason or another, are going straight to streaming. I mean, and not really getting like a big cinematic public theater run.
Yeah, honestly, in some ways, I kind of get why sometimes a movie might be immediately released to streaming because, it might be convenient and they won't have to share that money so much with theaters or anything. But I think a big chunk of the excitement for seeing a movie, especially with a group, is kind of taken away because there's something about going to see a movie for the first time on a big screen, or even a movie you've seen before, like we have, on a big screen that just gives a whole different experience. But after, 2020 happened and a lot of things closed down, streaming became a lot more popular, which has its ups and downs because then you also have better access to things you wouldn't have otherwise normally gotten. But like I started with, you kind of lose that experience of seeing it in a theater.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something the comedian John Crystal once said. You want to sit on your couch for a month and watch Netflix? That'll cost you just $12. You compare that to like, well, that's not part of the quote, but you compare that to like going to see like an individual film for like upwards of $10. It's it's a little more economic with streaming in a way, I suppose.
Yeah, you technically are saving money when you watch something on streaming, but sometimes I still think it's worth it to go see it in a movie theater. Because, like, what's a good example? Like something like Avatar or How to Train Your Dragon, those movies, like, they just don't look as good on a smaller screen as they do on a bigger screen. Because, like, I haven't seen the Avatar movies, but everybody tells me the one thing that's really good about those movies are the visuals. Everything looks absolutely impressive. And some of the quality does have to be brought down when bringing it to a smaller screen because you can't really fit as much, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just thinking about I remember, when you'd get a movie on cassette, there'd be this disclaimer, it's been modified, it's been formatted to fit the screen, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
For a long time, I didn't really understand what that meant until like recently explaining they've actually cropped stuff out of the frame. It turns out, which I didn't pick up on, probably because I hadn't seen a lot of these films in the theater before. But now, when I see the side to side comparison, it's like, ooh, that's a huge compromise.
Oh, for sure. And when I was growing up and I saw that message at the beginning of the film, I thought it literally just meant that they shrunk it down. I didn't really think of the possibility that the quality also suffered a little bit. And circling back to Avatar, some people have told me that when they saw it in the movie theaters, it looked absolutely amazing. But when they saw it at home, whether it be on streaming or otherwise, they said it still looks impressive, but it does suffer in some of the spectacle because like the screen's a lot smaller, so they have to modify it and format it, and it just doesn't look as impressive.
Now, I've mentioned before, when I saw Spider-Man: No Way Home in the theater, and I think this was probably the first my first movie going out after COVID kind of came down. At this point, technically, people were kind of still obligated to mask up and stuff, but we could more or less sit together and all that. But yeah, I don't know. Some of the more high energy action scenes, they have that certain sting, for lack of a better word, or certain power. Or on a big screen with surround sound and stuff. I have not since seen the film again, and on a big screen or on streaming or whatever. But if I did, I don't know if it would be quite the same, at home.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree. Like one thing, especially for a movie theater, that they have the advantage of is getting across the size and scope of various worlds. Like if you're traveling through space or if you're flying through the sky or if you're going through this vast open area, a movie theater screen can help emphasize how big and just beautiful these worlds can be. Whereas watching it at home, it's like, yeah, that looks impressive, but it doesn't feel as grand because it can't give you that size and scope.
So if they were to, I think they're planning on releasing all six Star Wars episodes 1 through 6, right?
I want to say I heard something about that. I know they were planning to at least re-release the Phantom Menace. I don't know if they were going to release the other ones as well, but those movies would be very cool to see on the big screen. I think I saw the sequel trilogy in theaters, but when it came to the other six that came out first, I did not see any of them in theaters. Like I wasn't even around for the original trilogy. And then when not the sequel, the prequel trilogy came out, I remember when Revenge of the Sith was in theaters, but at that point, I wasn't allowed to watch it yet. So my mom and I would go to see something else. I think it was a Fantastic Four film.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I until Episode 7 came out, I had not seen a Star Wars movie in theaters.
yeah.
But it's like I would love to go back and see some of them in theaters because it's like being able to see how big space is on a movie theater screen or some of the worlds that they've created. I would love to see it.
I think I would just like to see like the big climactic, like X-wing fight scene at the beginning of the original movie, like on that size and scope, on that kind of screen with that kind of surround sound. I think that would be most immersive.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see the final battle in the prequel trilogy between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Uh, like the opening of Revenge of the Sith, I would love to see on the big screen. Some of the just some of the space battles in general from those movies, whether it be the original trilogy or the prequels, I feel would be much more exciting in a movie theater.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about kind of the pandemic relevance, and I did find another article that kind of mentioned how that, as I guess, more or less kind of affected the numbers of attendance in film theaters. Like it was down, it went down since 2019, 8 percentage points in America and 20 in Sweden. I can't say if it was more or less because of COVID, but I guess mm, I guess with the lockdown lasting for so long, people had a lot of time to think about, hey, we got a lot of options we can easily access for just a few bucks a month with this. So why turn that down?
Yeah, it's definitely convenient for them, but this does help me bring up a point that I do want to make about this. While viewers are saving money, there are others who are losing money. And a perfect example of that is when Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow movie came out, which was just at the time where they released it in both movie theaters and on streaming. Uh, but because so many people stayed at home to watch it on streaming, because hey, it's cheaper and everybody could be, you could have as many people watching it as you want without having to pay any extra. The problem is Scarlett Johansson was promised a certain amount and she did not get it. And a large part of that is likely because people were streaming instead of going to theaters. So I think she ended up suing Disney or Marvel or whatever. And I remember some people were saying that it's like, oh, she's being greedy. She's already getting tens of millions from this. And I'm thinking, yeah, she could live the rest of her life with the money that she has now. But the argument I would make is that if you are promised a certain amount, regardless of what it is, and then you don't get it, I would be slightly bothered too.
Yeah,
Especially,
like
especially since it wasn't her fault.
it's like the thing of like if you're telling me that, well then mean it, you know?
Granted, they probably didn't expect to lose so much money because of streaming, but at the same time, if you promise somebody a certain amount, you better fulfill that promise.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I feel like that kind of thing. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of a coincidence, I guess. I think tonight might be the first night of the NFL draft, and you know how I've heard like a story from from like the book that was written by one of the NFL players that I met at church when they came and visited and did an interview. Um, he talked in his book about how you know teams would call say we're going to pick you if we get the chance, and then they don't do it. It's like I guess maybe they often change their mind without telling them, or they just they're so focused on taking their team to the next level or whatever that they don't like remember, hey, we had our eye on this guy, but hey, this guy's even better, forget about him. I don't know, I know it kind of happens all the time, I guess.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, obviously, each team should at least be in the mindset of putting together a team that they think will get them all the way to the end, like all the way to the Super Bowl or whatever final game in the season is called, depending on the sport. Um, and sometimes they might talk to someone ahead of time, being like, if we get the chance, we will take you in. But they might be saying the words, if we get the chance, because then that can give them a relatively easy out in case they decide not to. Because yeah, they might find somebody better, or they might realize that the person they were looking at is not as promising as they thought. So unless they outright say we are going to take you onto our team, then they're not necessarily obligated. And even if they do promise, they aren't technically obligated, though it's still kind of a jerk move if you say you're going to take someone and then you don't.
So aspiring NFL players, if they call you before your name is called, don't believe it. Be skeptical.
Oh yeah, I would say until the official announcement is made, don't necessarily guarantee anything.
Yeah.
And it's already hard enough to get on the team, and it's even harder to get onto the part of the team that actually plays during the games. Because sometimes you're brought onto the team and then you just are in the practice squad, or you're just on the bench waiting to see if someone gets injured and then you can take their place. So the draft alone is very difficult. So just that anticipation might be killing them. And then if you get their hopes up only to dash them, that's not really cool.
Well, kind of going back to the whole thing about revenue with streaming and with theaters, it's not an entirely new thing for there to be like a tension between the two. Like, let's take when Michael Eisner was the head of the Walt Disney Company, he expressed a lot of interest in putting out new video releases of their older films, but at first the company was reluctant because they thought it would take money away from theatrical reissues, which was something they had kind of a long tradition of doing. But I guess they more or less found a compromise and made older films available on home video shelves for just a limited time. So they kind of maybe saved their bottom line that way, more or less.
Yeah, they definitely found a system that worked. And maybe they can do the same with streaming, like maybe wait a lot longer to put something on a streaming service after it's come out of theaters. But so far, movie theaters have been suffering, as far as I can tell, due to the convenience, quote unquote, of streaming services. So I feel like if they can't find a way to have streaming and movie theaters coexist soon, then one or the other is probably going to start uh, vanishing over time. And my personal thought is I hope that doesn't happen to movie theaters.
Well, I feel like, I am kind of intrigued though by the increasing prevalence of older stuff coming back to theaters. Like, I remember when we were walking out of Shrek 2 and they had like the poster announcing all the live action Spider-Man films coming back. And I mentioned this to my mom after I came home. She's like, yeah, I think, with streaming, that's pretty much all the movie theaters have got left to live on, more or less. Said something like that. And I feel like I would probably more or less agree.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. One thing I will say though is apparently Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2 as a re-release did really well financially. So maybe there's still some hope yet, although it could be banking off nostalgia and how many people love the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. But it's a start at the very least.
Yeah, I think it may be a pretty effective lifeline. I am kind of curious to see kind of what will be coming back in the future.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I would definitely say that there's going to be some movies coming out in the next few years that are like a significant anniversary that they will re-release. Um, and if it was a popular movie, then it could still make a decent amount of money. Like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, those movies have been out for years, like at least a decade, if not more, like a decade and a half. And despite people knowing those movies, inside and out. They can quote it. They like to laugh at them. They still paid to go see it.
And what's really interesting, they're releasing all of them, not just the Maguire ones, but all the Garfield and the Tom Holland ones, including No Way Home, which came out, I think, only just about 2.5 years ago in theaters originally. So that I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and Spider-Man No Way Home technically did already have a re-release because not too long after it came out in theaters and it was about to be taken out, they kind of re-released it again, but they added in a few extra minutes of content. So it'd be good to see it again because I know how many people love that one. I know I love that one. Um, in fact, I remember watching the first trailer for the movie. I was with my mom, and when we saw Alfred Molina on screen, we lost our minds because it's like we love Spider-Man 2. We love Alfred Molina's depiction of Doc Ock. So to see him again in the role was just so awesome. And being able to relive that in a movie theater, even though it's only been out for a couple years or so, I would pay to see it again.
Yeah, now that you mentioned they added a little bit, I would kind of like to maybe go back and maybe visit in a theater like the extended cut if they put that out. I'd like to kind of see that.
I would imagine that they would. I mean, I can't imagine why they wouldn't now that it exists. Um, but even if they don't release the extended version, it's still a great experience.
Oh, yeah, I think it's probably my favorite to this day of all the live action Spider-Man films so far.
Yeah, for a while, for me, I would have said maybe like Spider-Man 2 from Tobey Maguire's time as the character. Um, I did grow up with the third one. I think that was the first one I'd seen in theaters.
Yeah, I
And
think me too. Yeah.
in fact, I do remember there being a big thunderstorm when we went to go see it. Anyway, um, yeah, the second and third one. In fact, I'll say it. All three Sam Raimi Spider-Man films I enjoy. But I will say I think my favorite one now is probably Spider-Man No Way Home.
All right. So that makes two of us. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see well, what the future holds for like these theatrical reissues, and I think maybe we'll just go ahead and shift it now to the curious question of the day. In this case, what are some quotes from popular media that you think are very good to live by?
Yeah, this is definitely a topic I look forward to talking about because I enjoy making people smile. I love making people laugh. And I feel like especially over the last few years that we've had, people definitely need some uplifting messages. And then I ended up writing down 5 or 6 of these, and the first one I wrote down actually, the first 2 came from Sonic games. And the first one being, "If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have." And I kind of took that as a way of saying, even if everything goes wrong, I'm still going to push forward. I'm still going to fight for what I believe in, no matter how difficult it gets.
Yeah, there may be some times when you got to fight on your own. You may not have an ally in sight. You got to no, you've got to make a choice. Are you going to let that stop you? Going to let that defeat you, or are you going to stay true to yourself?
Exactly. 'Cause, like, some people will even say it feels like the world is against them. And it's like, even during times like that, you still want to keep going. Or as they say in Meet the Robinsons, keep moving forward.
Oh yeah.
Then the second one also came from a Sonic game where they simply say, "An adventure is no fun if it's too easy." It's like, yeah, sometimes we want something simple, we want something easy, but oftentimes pushing through the harder stuff, the more difficult things, or things that we struggle and basically crawl to get through can often be the most rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. I think of like even experiences I've had since I've been with Artists Unlimited, and even in recent years, some very personal experiences. I feel like if none of that stuff had happened, I don't know if I would be where I am right now. I mean, I mean, sure, probably never felt good in the moment, but in a way, it probably was a key contributor to me, like like overcoming some anxiety or figure or figuring out that I can't keep doing what I'm doing, and I gotta start doing something different or whatever. So
Absolutely. And we've seen, especially celebrities who have everything handed to them. Look what happens to some of them when everything starts off way too easy for them. Some of them will completely fall apart when they have to do anything strenuous, or they become incredibly entitled and nobody likes them for that. In fact, there's this one image I found not too long ago that I really like where it shows a cliffside that first starts off like kind of dipping in and then curving back up, like it goes up and then back towards you before it gets to the top, or something like that. It's like either a steep climb. Hang on. It's like I can picture it in my head. I'm just trying to find the best way to describe it. Whereas basically, the person who takes the hard path first will have it easier later. Whereas the people who take the easy route first, they'll have a much harder time later on.
yeah, think like nobody seems to really have like I guess a level head who hasn't had to struggle for anything.
Yeah, a lot of them definitely have that struggle. Some people, despite how much easier their life is compared to others, they still remain humble. And I think a great example would be Keanu Reeves. He's got all this fame, he's got all this fortune, but he's still very much a likable guy. And some of the people that are celebrities, they had to basically crawl, fight their way to where they are. Like some of them did not start out that well, and then they got to where they were because they worked hard for it.
Yeah, perhaps some of the most inspirational ones I've heard stories of, like people who like grew up like dirt poor, or they had like a lot of drama and even maybe some abuse or something in their family, and and they kind of they had like tall odds to beat, and somehow they did it. That's probably one of the coolest things.
Oh, for sure. And some of them, they go through some hard stuff that they themselves cause and then they turn it around. Like Robert Downey Jr., he wasn't making the greatest choices earlier on in his career, but now, after having played Iron Man for over a decade, he has become one of the highest paid actors in the world.
Yeah, yeah, that is pretty cool.
And then the next one I wrote down, I guess I forgot to write down who said this one, but it's fairly simple. It just goes, well done is better than well said. To me, that kind of comes across as also saying something like actions speak louder than words. Because a lot of people, they could say, oh, yeah, I can totally do this, or I'm totally going to do this. But until you actually do it, it's not going to come across as powerful. Like if you say, I'm going to donate to some charity. That sounds nice. It sounds really nice. But until you actually do it, it's not going to come across as powerful as it could be.
Yeah, and I feel like I believe there's actually some scripture, like specifically in the Gospels, where Jesus says, don't advertise that you're doing something charitable, because you shouldn't have to do that. Your attitude, your action, should speak enough. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it's kind of like in movies, I've seen a lot of people say this, is that generally you want to show and not tell. Like
Yeah, I
if
heard that. Yeah,
Yeah, like you could say like all this cool stuff happened in a movie, and it's like, okay, that's cool. I would love to have seen that. So it's like actually doing something you say you're going to do, not only I think will make you a better person, but it'll also build up your trust with other people because then they'll be like, oh, he actually did what he's going to say. I like this guy now.
yeah.
And then the next one is a quote from James Cameron where he says, if you set your goals ridiculously high and it's a failure, you will fail above everyone else's success. This kind of goes in line with something that I tell myself is that it's good to always have a goal that seemingly is just out of reach because then you always have something to strive for. And then you're constantly fighting for it. You become a better person as a result. And for all you know, you'll eventually meet that goal. And it also kind of ties in to something that's often said in the Mary Poppins musical, where they say, if you reach for the stars, all you get are the stars. But if you reach for the heavens, you'll get the stars thrown in. So it's like you can reach high, but if you can reach even higher, then you'll get everything else along the way.
Yeah, I guess there's a bit of a temptation that's common to people, to play it safe and just uh, do only what you think is realistic and safe, and sometimes because you want to be sure it's going to work out in the end. You know, I would say just plan carefully, but at the same time, um, you know, be open to trying something new, or open to, I guess, well, do, doing something that might not work out and see what happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I lost my train of thought, but I really do enjoy this quote. It's like I said, it goes perfectly with something I tell myself all the time, and it happens to tie into a musical that we did recently. So there's multiple connections that I share with it. And then the second to last one I wrote down comes from Mark Cuban. And he says, if you're looking for the next big thing and you're looking where everyone else is, you're looking in the wrong place. And to me, that basically means you want to stand out or you want to do something different. Because if you're just like everybody else, you're just going to blend in, no one's going to notice you, and ultimately everything's going to crumble in the end, maybe. But if you do something different and people see that, then they might be more inclined to come check out what you're doing or saying. And that might help things along a little bit more and you are more likely to succeed.
Yeah, it's difficult to cool, like, be noticed or really like make an impact if you're just going along with whatever the people or the culture around you is doing. But if you do something a little creative and a little more bold, that can maybe change everything.
Absolutely. And sometimes you need to take big risks. Sometimes they won't work, but the ones that do, they will really work. And sometimes people don't expect it, and that really helps as well. But then the last one I wrote down, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it comes from someone named Maya Angelou, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but this quote I definitely resonate with, where they say, if you are always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be. To me, this is very similar to the previous quote, where you definitely want to stand out. You don't want to be like everybody else. You don't always want to do exactly what everyone else is doing. And I definitely resonate with this quote because growing up, I was often called weird or something ridiculous like that. And for a while, I took it as a bad thing because I wanted to be like everybody else. But nowadays, anytime someone calls me weird or different or whatever, I take it as a compliment because to me, that means I'm not like everybody else and I don't want to be like everyone else. I want to be different. I want to be unique. I want to be special. And I want to be my own thing. So if
Yeah,
I'm
this
trying to be normal, that's going to be boring.
yeah, this is something I think that I've struggled with even well into my adulthood, trying to mm, accept myself for who I am. I dreamed of being like this actor or like this musician or this athlete. I would have often fantasize about things like that. But you know, if if my heart is not exactly in it, or if it's not genuine, then what good is it?
Absolutely. If it's fake, then no one's going to want it.
All right, so I wrote down. I think I have seven here, and the first one is actually a quote from the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes when Calvin's dad says, "I do what's right, not what gets approval." And I feel like that's an important thing because oftentimes those two things um, very different, and I would probably say very much opposite a lot of the time. A lot of the time, what's popular isn't exactly right.
Yeah, there are some instances where what gets approved and what's right do go hand in hand, but a lot of the time, like you said, they don't. And a primary example is some of these ridiculous challenges I see people do on social media, like the whole thing with the Tide Pods a while back, or some of these weird things that people would snort, which is already gross and unhealthy, but just dangerous. Like even the infamous cinnamon challenge years back, it's like it was so popular, but it also had the risk of being fatal if you did it wrong. And then there were ones where people would call it a challenge, even though some of the people involved weren't actively participating. Like not too long after the Tide Pod one, there was one where these people would pour boiling hot water on each other, and sometimes those people wouldn't even be prepared for it. Like they could be asleep and somebody would pour boiling hot water on them, which would make it so much worse because it's like you're actively putting someone in danger, all for the sake of a challenge.
And cheap entertainment, frankly, too.
Exactly. If you're doing something like that just to try and get popular, then I have no respect for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I definitely like appreciate like Rob Gronkowski for kind of making the commercial saying "Don't eat Tide Pods" to kind of turn that around. So
Yeah, he's not my favorite player, but I will give him props for that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And even not just like, and even I think this extends beyond like just dangerous challenge videos, like even stuff like you hear a lot of talk about politically correct and woke and stuff, and some of the heart of it may kind of be in the right place, but I think a lot of it is technically kind of not. I'm not going to get too much on a soapbox, or try not to, but a lot of it is not exactly biblically right, or even right in the reason sense, I don't think.
Yeah, there are a lot of things, whether it's biblical or not, that are very questionable, whether for ethical reasons, religious reasons, or what have you. But yeah, there are a lot of things that are frowned upon for one reason or another, but people will still do it just because some other people might say it's okay, even if it's not.
Then second I wrote, is just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And this is a quote from the Disney film The Santa Claus. Yeah, I feel like you know, some people, I guess, they have to like see to believe, and I don't know. It's just you know, it's you know, you know. Until then, they won't believe, but that's not always true, though.
Yeah, there are some things that we have never seen in our lives yet we still believe exist. Like I've never been to Japan. I've never been outside of North America. And because I haven't seen it with my own eyes, I could very easily say, "Oh, because I haven't seen it, that means those places don't exist." But I know those places exist, even if I haven't seen them. I know
And
that's
then
kind
I
of a
Mhm.
exaggerated example, but it still gets the point across.
Sure. Taken then, of course, probably one of the most quoted even to this day, the old Spider-Man quote: "With great power comes great responsibility." And I think history has proven that true. You know, whether it's cultural history, political history, or whatever, time and time again, we've seen that proven.
Yeah, even though that quote has been said and even memed to death, it doesn't make it any less true. Because, yes, if you are in a high position of power, you also have a high amount of responsibility to use that power in the correct way. Because some people, they will get that power, abuse it, and turn into this monster, for the lack of a better word. Whereas those who know how to use their power responsibly, they can do something wonderful with it, whether it be political leaders or influencers, celebrities. If you're in a position where you can heavily influence a lot of people, do so responsibly because you have
Like,
no idea how many people you might actually be impacting for better or worse.
like even if you're an entertainer, you're doing more than just simply giving people something to watch or listen to or whatever. Uh, um, there's a good chance that you know that millions of young people out there are pretty much being, figuratively speaking, babysat by the TV, to kind of borrow somebody's quote. They're they're growing up uh, on on what is sometimes called the idiot box, which is the television, or the radio or whatever, and that's their entertainment. Those are the voices they tend to listen to the most. So, mm, so you have that power to really shape how they think about themselves, how they think about the world, how they think about right and wrong. And you're in public, in like any capacity. You've got a platform. Don't like take it lightly.
Even something like just being a parent to a child.
Yeah.
That alone carries a lot of responsibility, even if it's just one person, because the way you raise them, like I'm not a parent, but I still understand that
Yeah.
the way you raise them for the first few years, that could be carried with them for the rest of their life.
Yeah, that's definitely something I myself thought about, and I'm going to connect that to a later quote as we go along. But yeah,
Sure.
it- yeah, I feel like yeah, that's definitely something you know, uh, how you're kind of raised early on can kind of go with you well into the rest of your life potentially. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, and then and this is probably a lesser known quote, depending on how like cult nerdy or whatever you are. But this is actually from the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, and it's a Harry Osborn quote, and it's "Keep your mouth shut about things you don't understand."
That is definitely a powerful one. Like another way to kind of say that
Yeah,
is do not jump to conclusions.
yeah,
Because it's like so many people on social media, they might just read the title of an article, whether it's true or not, and then suddenly act like they're experts on the subject. And that can be heavily misleading for other people as well. And that could spread, which is extremely dangerous. Because if it's not true, then people are just spreading false rumors or lies or some other negative thing. So it's like if you don't understand it, do the research first before you start talking about it.
yeah, yeah. Or to kind of put into my brother's verbiage, if I may, you don't know what you're talking about. He'll say that at an appropriate time, and I love him for that.
Well,
But
sure.
uh, like it's got to be careful. I feel like mm, I think it's hard. I think maybe for some people because of their religion or background or whatever, sometimes to kind of see past just complete black and white because yeah, because they've grown up being having it drilled into them. This is right, that is wrong, and so their heart may sometimes be in the right place, but at the same time, you don't always know the person's story. You don't know their motivations. You don't know. Certainly don't justify, don't excuse what they're doing. But at the same time, uh, you know, you don't know what's going on. You don't know what they're going through or whatever. Just you know, sure, don't condone it, but don't at the same time be careful. At least how you're judging.
Oh, yeah. You always want to be careful with things like that, especially with information you don't fully grasp yet.
Yeah. Next one is um, rather shorter one. It's from a climactic point in the original Star Wars, and it's when Obi-Wan says to Luke, "Let go, Luke." And I feel like I don't really need to hide the context or anything. I feel like it's most people would probably know the moment or the film in whole front to back by this point. So this is the moment where pretty much all the X-wing guys are going down. Luke is still standing. I think he's at this point the only one left. And and then he hears kind of Obi-Wan speaking in his head, use the force, let go. And it's almost like he's telling him, don't just trust what you see, you know, unleash your inner power, trust, have faith, trust what's not quite as obvious. Let go of the need to control everything on your own strength. I guess is the best way to sum it up.
So it's kind of like saying trust your instinct.
Or more like trust in something bigger than yourself. I feel
Okay.
like it's more like a faith thing. I think.
Yeah, faith can get us through quite a lot. And
Yeah,
in his case, he used it to blow up a space station.
yeah, And then another Star Wars quote, and this is from Empire Strikes Back: "You must unlearn what you have learned." And I feel like, kind of going back to the whole, things curing with you into adulthood from your upbringing. Yeah, I feel like that's proven true for me. Well, stuff that happens early on can really stick with you well into your adult years as well. And you know, some of it, I guess, more or less depending on how you were generally brought up, can be good or it can be bad. It can be maybe a mixed bag. But there are some things like maybe personality traits or maybe even cultural ideas or something that that may have been drilled into you that maybe you shouldn't take like too fundamentally or too seriously, and maybe you should train yourself to think different.
Yeah, that's definitely one that I'm gonna take into heavy consideration because growing up in the schools that I went to, I wasn't exactly the most popular kid. And there were several things that other kids would say or do that weren't the most kind. But the problem was they did it so often that it became engraved in my mind. And now it is very difficult for me to think otherwise. So, like, if I mess up slightly, I dwell on it far more than I should.
Mm,
If somebody says or does something nice for me, I'm thinking, wait, this can't be right. Like, do I deserve this? So it's like that is something I have been working on for a long time to unlearn so that I can refill that space with more positive things.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm on a similar journey myself. I feel like I am mm, kind of slowly but surely, if not quicker, training myself to, with the help of good company and good faith disciplines and whatever, trying to want to replace, the not so great and great stuff that's been drilled into me with some more positive and more accurate things.
Exactly. That's something a lot of us need to
Yeah,
put into practice.
yeah, yeah. And then the last one, and it may sound generic on the surface, but it's a little bit. I'll certainly qualify it though, or clarify. Um, I don't know. Did you see that Progressive Insurance commercial where like a bunch of agents are like singing a cappella, and then one of them's kind of directing them, saying, no, 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 not like that. I don't believe it.
Maybe I have, but it's honestly been a little while since I've seen a progressive ad, partly
Yeah,
because I don't have any television channels where I am. Um, but maybe I've seen it before. I've definitely
yeah,
seen a few progressive ads that I like. Um, but I'm not sure if I remember that one.
yeah. Well, it was long ago, so I can't say I blame you though. Um, yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's like, so this guy, keeps kind of, they're practicing this whole performance, and he keeps like stopping him, saying, "No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Again, try again." You know, I can't say that I take that our creative arts pastor necessarily does this, but it's something he'll essentially say, like, I don't believe you. I want us to. I take. I want to really hear that you believe what you're singing, because then the congregation will. And I feel like that's applicable, very applicable to like um, I think very relevant to us because we're performers. We perform in Artists Unlimited, and our artistic director will pretty much regularly advise us, go for it, really be serious, really be expressive, really, I want to feel it, or that kind of thing. So I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like, and if you do, I think audiences will be more engaged, they'll be more interested, they'll feel it, they'll be invested in the story, and it'll be more effective.
Yeah, he definitely gives a lot of direction like that. Like he always wants us to be invested on what's going on when we're on stage.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because if we believe it, then the audience believes it. And then one thing that I just thought of while thinking about this is when the internet movie reviewer, the nostalgia critic, talked about a movie called The Avengers. It is not in connection with the Marvel characters. It's a separate movie entirely that happens to fall under the same name. But at one point in the review, he says something like, and I'm slightly paraphrasing here. Here's my question. If no one in this movie is invested in what they're doing, why should we?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I haven't seen that movie, but I guess I'll take Mr. Walker's word for it.
Yeah, basically, a lot of the characters did not seem that interested in what they were saying or what they're doing. So it's like, why should we care what happens if they don't seem to care either?
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's going to do it for now. Thanks everyone for streaming. Like I said in the intro, take advantage of our platforms. Email, messaging, whatever, and comments and questions are always welcome.
And if you have suggestions for a future episode, or if you have anything about a previous episode that you'd like to know about, basically any interaction we have with the audience is more than welcome. We love the engagement, we love the interaction, and the more that we have, the better.
Yeah. Thanks again, everyone, and if not later, we'll be back again next week. And till then, take care.
See you next time.